Welcome back to my YouTube channel, a place where coin collectors, treasure hunters, and curious minds gather to explore the hidden fortunes buried in everyday pocket change. And today we are diving into the incredible story of the 2002 D1 coin, a seemingly ordinary copper-plated zinc penny minted in Denver that has become an unbelievable sensation in the numismatic world because certain rare examples are rumored to carry a staggering estimated value of up to $98 million due to a combination of minting errors, striking anomalies, and the mysterious circumstances surrounding how such an unusual combination of mistakes could have escaped the mint's strict quality control and found its way into circulation, turning what should be a humble, ordinary 1-cent piece into one of the most coveted coins in modern American history. A coin that collectors talk about in hushed tones and dream about discovering because the story of this remarkable penny is one that blends history, chance, metallurgy, technological imperfections, and the unpredictable ways that small deviations can cause massive waves of excitement in the numismatic community. When we look at the 2002 D penny at first glance, we see the familiar Lincoln portrait on the obverse, the classic wheat or memorial style depending on our memory of older coins, and the standard coppery sheen most Americans have seen countless times in their lives, tossed on countertops or left in drawers or spilled across car seats. But what makes a particular 2002 D penny worth so much is not what it looks like to the casual observer, but what lies beneath its surface, literally and figuratively, because the most famous example that collectors whisper about contains an astonishing off-metal strike error where the coin was minted on a planchette that was never meant to be used for a penny, causing the entire composition, weight, edge tone, and even diameter tolerance to stray wildly outside the norm. And this type of mistake is beyond rare. It represents a breach in the intricate sorting and manufacturing system where blank planchets must be separated precisely based on size and metal type, yet in this mysterious case something slipped through the cracks and created one of the most desirable modern errors imaginable. Imagine a tiny piece of metal that should have been destined to become a dime or even a foreign contract coin mistakenly fed into the Lincoln cent press, resulting in a 2002 D issue that was struck with pressure calibrated for one metal but forced against another, causing crisp details in some places and ghost-like soft impressions in others, giving the surface an uneven strike that would tell any trained numismatist that something went terribly, incredibly wrong at the minting phase. And this is only the beginning of the mystery because in addition to the wrong planchette composition, there are examples speculated to have double die obverse errors where Abraham Lincoln's iconic portrait displays an unnatural thickness or doubled edges on his jawline, hair strands, and the lettering of Liberty, In God We Trust, or the date itself, with each amplified contour marking a striking anomaly that is impossible to replicate intentionally and therefore immensely valuable when confirmed by professional graders. The 2002 D penny becomes even more fascinating when we consider that Denver mint strikes are usually known for strong detail and fewer catastrophic mistakes compared to other mints in certain eras, and yet this was a year when transition metals, planchette shortages, and mechanical stress on the die presses caused certain machines to overstrike, misalign, and occasionally jam, leading to extremely rare stacking errors where the coin ends up struck slightly off-center or with a visible crescent of blank space near the rim, a feature that collectors crave because the more dramatic the misalignment, the more visually striking and unique the piece becomes, turning what most people toss into tip jars into a numismatic masterpiece that investors are willing to pay fortunes to acquire. Another aspect that makes the 2002 D1 coin so desirable among experts is the possibility of a mule error, a legendary type of mistake in which the obverse die and reverse die do not match the intended coin pairing, meaning a Lincoln obverse could theoretically end up struck with a reverse meant for a different coin in the US Mint catalog. And while documented mule errors are incredibly scarce, their existence has proven that such mismatches do occur, and therefore the mere rumor or faint evidence of a mule-like strike on a 2002 D penny ignites wild enthusiasm because the financial upside is immeasurable and collectors begin speculating based on die rotations, reverse alignment diagnostics, and subtle engraving style mismatches that hint at something once in a lifetime. Minting is a complex orchestration of hydraulics, metal chemistry, temperature, lubrication, human decision-making, and high-precision industrial engineering. And it is within this system that mistakes become miracles for collectors, and the 2002 D penny is the quintessential case study because it reveals how even with advanced manufacturing protocols the tiniest miscommunication or timing error in planchette feeding or die calibration can produce monsters of rarity. And when one of those monsters escapes the mint and enters circulation, its journey becomes mythical because every hand it passes through unknowingly touches a wealth that could change lives, yet only the trained eye or lucky enthusiast recognizes its potential. The rumored $98 million price tag attached to a specific 2002 D penny comes from its status not as an ordinary era coin but as a pinnacle of layered anomalies, a coin that reportedly exhibits multiple noteworthy diagnostic features simultaneously: the wrong planchette weight that causes its acoustic ring to sound unlike any normal Lincoln cent when tapped, a broad strike expansion that pushes its rim beyond normal tolerances and eliminates the typical collar lines, die rotation that causes the reverse orientation to be tilted when compared to the obverse, and surface microtears indicating a stressed metal structure that occurred during the strike, perhaps due to unexpected pressure discrepancies or uneven die contact points, all of which is like striking gold in the world of minting analysis because the likelihood of even one of these factors occurring is minute, but the chance of them all occurring in the same coin is astronomically low, something that borders on impossible and therefore captures the imagination of wealthy collectors who are willing to pay any sum necessary to own a coin that is more unicorn than currency. A market for these coins is not fueled solely by material scarcity but also by psychological rarity, a concept that affirms humans are drawn to anomalies, to artifacts that blur the line between accident and art. And so when the whispers of the 2002 D penny began circulating through numismatic forums, collector conventions, and private appraisal circles, the myth strengthened, drawing attention not only from everyday enthusiasts but also from museums, private investors, and high-end auction houses that recognize that coins with multi-layered manufacturing defects are often sold behind closed doors, never announced publicly, and traded for secretive 7- or 8-figure deals that scholars might never see documented in the open market. Some claim that the $98 million valuation is speculative or exaggerated, a dramatic number attached to a legendary example to heighten fascination. Yet even if the true figure were 1/10 of the rumor, it would still be one of the most valuable modern pennies in existence, and that possibility alone is enough to drive collectors to examine every 2002 D coin they receive in change, to weigh them with pocket scales, inspect lettering under magnification, and study rim transitions in hopes of uncovering one of these rare specimens, because no one knows how many were created, and it only takes one extraordinary example to rewrite a person's financial future. And here's the real secret: the most valuable coins are often not discovered in banks or collector rolls, but in random everyday places like glove compartments, parking meter trays, coin jars in kitchens, and stacks of change forgotten in drawers, because circulation is chaotic and careless, and that chaos occasionally allows history to slip into someone's palm without fanfare, perhaps even unnoticed for years, until a curious collector picks it up and wonders why the coin feels just a little heavier, why the edge looks subtly wider, why Lincoln's portrait seems slightly thicker or misaligned, and that moment becomes the spark that leads to authentication, grading, and potentially the most life-changing discovery a collector could ever dream of. The allure of the 2002 D penny lies not only in its errors but in the narrative of possibility, because every person who hears the story of this seemingly small copper-colored coin begins to look at pennies differently, no longer dismissing them as worthless, no longer tossing them aside, but treating them as potential hidden artifacts of unimaginable value. And that shift in perception is powerful because it transforms everyday life into a treasure hunt where you become part of a story that has captivated collectors for decades, a story of chance, rarity, and the relentless excitement that follows anyone bold enough to look closely at the smallest things in life, because sometimes those smallest things turn out to be worth millions. Next, 2012 D1 cent USA coin. We explore one of the most astonishing stories in modern numismatics, the tale of the 2012 D1 cent coin that collectors claim could be worth a staggering $99 million because of its bizarre errors, unusual minting mistakes, and the possibilities that surround its creation. And in this video we will dive deep into the myths, the legends, the technical flaws, and the details that make this small Lincoln penny feel like an artifact of immense mystery, rarity, and potential value, sparking conversations in coin forums, auctions, and private collectors' circles as enthusiasts debate how something made of copper-plated zinc could ever become so valuable, and how a coin minted by the Denver Mint in 2012, a year in which billions of pennies were produced, could transform from spare change to an item of unimaginable worth. And that is where the story begins, because to understand why a single 2012 D penny might command such a price, 1. Must explore the world of mint errors, planchette anomalies, striking imperfections, die deterioration, and transitional mistakes that turn ordinary coins into multi-million-dollar unicorns. And when we examine the 2012 D penny in this context, we begin to see how collectors' imaginations run wild, because 2012 was a year full of mass production, heavy mint wear, and accelerated stress on coin dies that caused more errors than many other years, especially in the lower denominations. And when you combine this environment with the fragile zinc core of modern pennies, you create conditions where minting failures become tangible, visible, and sometimes astonishing. So imagine someone discovering a 2012 D penny that has multiple lead errors, the type of piece that is so abnormal that it defies typical grading logic, a coin that perhaps was struck off-center by 40 to 60%, where Lincoln's profile is cut away on the rim or even spread into the blank surface of the planchette, the date partially missing or distorted, and then layer that with a double die obverse, where the motto "In God We Trust" shows a ghost-like shadow of letters, particularly the top of the G or the crossbar of the T, creating a doubling effect that can be recognized even without magnification. And visualize the way Liberty on the left side of the coin appears stretched or split, creating a floating echo behind the letters, and the mint mark D, instead of being crisp and sharp, appears swollen, repunched, or oddly flattened, as if struck twice at slightly differing angles, forming a unique artifact of the Denver Mint's machinery. And then imagine that beneath this unusual strike lies a planchette error, with the copper plating not adhering properly to the zinc interior, resulting in small blisters on the surface or raised bubbles near Lincoln's coat or hairline. And as the owner turns the coin over, the reverse shows signs of die fatigue, with the shield design having faded lines, washed out edges, or even tiny cracks radiating from the center near E pluribus unum. And collectors know that when these dramatic conditions combine in a single example, the rarity multiplies exponentially, because each error by itself might bring a small premium, maybe tens or hundreds of dollars, but when multiple distinct mint anomalies appear together on a coin that should never have left the mint in such form, a narrative begins to develop, and narratives, as any experienced coin collector will tell you, play a massive role in value, because people do not merely buy coins, they buy stories, they buy mystery, they buy uniqueness, and the idea that a mundane 2012 D penny could slip past the mint's quality controls with spectacular, layered defects fuels the imagination, and this imagination, combined with the scarcity of authenticated examples, drives whispers that such a specimen could sell for tens of millions of dollars, and some say 99 million is not impossible, because in recent years the market for unique coins with one-of-a-kind mistakes has grown wildly, with millionaires and investors who have no desire to own average coins but instead crave luxury collectibles, the types that could hang in a vault next to paintings and gemstones. And to understand how this inflation in perceived value works, consider how coins become legends. First, there is a rumor. Someone claims a coin exists, maybe in a private collection, maybe with photographic evidence, or perhaps only through stories heard secondhand. Then collectors obsessively search rolls of pennies, digging through bank boxes, flea markets, or estate collections, hoping to find that elusive mistake. And every time a new minor error is found, whether a small die crack or slight doubling, people treat it like a breadcrumb, as if it were a hint that the ultimate prize, the $99 million example, is somewhere out there. And the cycle feeds itself, with hobbyists convincing themselves that somewhere someone is holding the impossible specimen, hiding it from the public or waiting for the right auction to appear. And while many may dismiss this level of value as fantasy, the psychology of rarity is extremely powerful. And when a coin is not just flawed but spectacularly flawed in ways that break every expectation of numismatic standards, its price becomes unanchored from logic and enters the realm of prestige, exclusivity, and myth. And this is where the 2012 D comes back into focus, because so many collectors report examples of weak strikes, misaligned dies, partial collars, die gouges in the shield lines, and split copper plating in ways that suggest the Denver Mint had unusual production issues that year. And while most of these mistakes appear separately, the dream scenario involves them all layered into one surreal coin, a hybrid error so severe that it becomes a singular rarity. And when you consider how few of these errors are normally permitted to circulate, the idea that a single penny could escape detection with a perfect storm of mistakes sets the stage for astronomical valuations. And think of the collectors who buy million-dollar coins not because they need them, but because they want to own something that no museum or rival investor possesses, a statement piece that proves superiority. And what could be more dramatic than the humble 1-cent coin that transformed into a mythical treasure, minted quietly in Denver and then emerging years later as the coin that defied fate? And this is the type of narrative that drives speculative pricing. So people imagine a 2012 D penny that was struck on the wrong planchet entirely, perhaps on a dime or nickel blank, causing the copper color to disappear entirely or resulting in oversized rims. And in that scenario, the coin instantly becomes a transitional error of the highest order. And then add the possibility that the penny could be double struck in color, meaning it was struck twice without being removed from the striking chamber, causing the design to ghost outward in a warped halo. And if such a piece were then paired with copper blistering and die deterioration, it would stand as a monumental accident, a minting catastrophe preserved in metal. And collectors would pay not just for the coin, but for the chance to own a freak of history, because humans crave artifacts that break the rules, just as they prize misprinted stamps, off-center banknotes, or defective luxury watches. And this is the environment in which the 2012 D 1-cent coin gains its mythical $99 million valuation, because in forums, social media threads, and whispered conversations at coin shows, people speak of it like the holy grail of modern pennies, the one that could rewrite the market forever. And this speculative mania encourages more and more people to examine their change, rushing to pawnshops or contacting grading companies, sending off their coins in the hope that theirs is the legendary specimen. And every slight irregularity discovered only fuels the fire, because when someone finds even a small clip on the rim, or a faint doubling on the shield, they believe they might possess a fragment of the myth. And the more the myth grows, the more the supposed worth of the perfect error grows with it. And each new rumor adds fuel, creating a feedback loop in which the 2012 D penny does not merely become a collectible but a symbol of the modern treasure hunt, an equalizer that gives every person who has ever emptied a pocket or searched a coin roll a chance to become a millionaire. And so the story continues, a story where a tiny copper-plated penny minted in 2012 might someday cross an auction block for $99 million, not because its metal is precious, not because its face value is high, but because it represents the extraordinary, the improbable, and the irresistible thrill of discovering something the world believes should never have existed in the first place. And with that, we thank you for joining us in this journey through rarity, imagination, and numismatic mystery, reminding everyone that the next time you see a simple 2012 D penny, look closely, because you never know what kind of treasure might be hiding in plain sight. Last 1986 1-cent USA coin, we explore one of the most unbelievable stories in modern numismatics, a tale that begins with an ordinary 1986 1-cent coin, a piece that millions of Americans handled in their pockets and wallets, yet one that through the strange combination of minting errors, production flaws, and collector obsession has been said to reach an astonishing valuation of $100 million, a number so wild and beyond expectation that it makes people question how a simple penny could ever become one of the most valuable coins in existence. But today we will dive deeply into the hidden details, the overlooked imperfections, and the magical possibilities that transform this everyday copper-plated zinc piece into a treasure of unimaginable worth. A reminder that sometimes fortune hides where we least expect it, especially in a coin many would ignore or even toss aside without a second thought. So sit back as we journey into the fascinating world of 1986 pennies, their mysterious minting errors, and the bidding wars among collectors who constantly search for specimens that bend the rules of probability and rewrite the story of modern coinage. To understand the mythic value of a rare 1986 cent said to be worth $100 million, you must first understand the context of how pennies were made during that time, because 1986 was the fourth year after the United States Mint abandoned traditional solid copper composition and shifted to copper-plated zinc, a cost-saving switch that drastically changed the way the coins behaved under pressure, temperature, and striking conditions, and this change opened the door to a huge number of potential minting anomalies, from bubbling and plating separation to weak strikes and unintentional doubling from die fatigue, all of which created unique variations that collectors across the world now obsessively hunt for and study. And in the process of mass production, where countless planches are fed through machinery designed to print endless rows of uniform coins, mistakes are inevitable, and some of those mistakes end up being rarer than diamonds, more valuable than treasure chests, and infinitely more interesting than any piece of standard currency could ever be. One of the first major errors people talk about in relation to the 1986 penny is the dramatic possible off-metal strike, where instead of being struck on a copper-plated zinc core, a few planches could have come from scraps of earlier copper stock or blanks left over from a different run of coinage, which produces a dramatic weight difference. And any 1986 penny that weighs close to 3.11 grams instead of the expected 2.5 grams becomes an anomaly worthy of investigation, because that heavier weight suggests something extremely unusual and desirable to collectors who know what solid copper means in an age when copper cents had already vanished from standard circulation, and such a difference can be enough to send the value rocketing from ordinary pocket change into the thousands or tens of thousands. And if such an example were preserved in perfect condition with no signs of circulation, the allure only multiplies, eventually placing it among the most coveted coins in the world. Another category of error that skyrockets the desirability of the 1986 penny is the double die strike, a phenomenon that occurs when the design of the coin is imprinted twice at slightly different angles, creating a ghost-like duplication in the lettering, the portrait of Lincoln, or even the memorial reverse that defines this era of United States coinage. And while minor doubling may only appeal to casual collectors, significant doubling is another matter entirely, especially when the doubling is bold enough to be seen with the naked eye on prominent features like the date, the inscriptions "In God We Trust" or "Liberty," or the dramatic architecture of the Lincoln Memorial. And when these errors reach major visibility, they create one-of-a-kind specimens that command attention at auction, where bidders driven by prestige, rarity, and competitive impulse throw incredible sums at the chance to own something that virtually nobody else in the world possesses. And every year, numismatists discover double die errors that sell for thousands or hundreds of thousands. So the idea that one extraordinary 1986 cent might inflate to $100 million becomes a mixture of speculation, mania, and the desire to have a perfect storm of rarity, condition, story, and hype. Another infamous flaw involves the plating process, because zinc pennies are notorious for their structural weakness, and the thin copper layer that coats them can bubble, blister, peel, or corrode in unpredictable ways, creating dramatic surface distortions that attract collectors fascinated by the raw vulnerability of the early zinc era. And sometimes these plating errors are subtle, little ripples or waves across the coin's surface, but other times they are monstrous and unmistakable, huge bubbles rising from the metal like geological eruptions, alien landscapes trapped in a penny-sized circle. And it is these extreme examples that occasionally hit the spotlight, being locked away in protective holders and preserved as the numismatic version of bizarre natural specimens, each one representing a unique accident that cannot be replicated or reproduced. And when such a specimen emerges in pristine, untouched form, never carried in pockets or battered by circulation, its potential Value becomes a blank canvas on which collectors project their desire and imagination. And while not every plating floor earns huge sums, the idea of one surviving in perfect, eye-catching condition with a story attached can lead to valuations that spiral into the surreal. But perhaps the most dramatic error of all, and the kind that collectors whisper about in forums, auction houses, and private networks, is the full misstrike or die misalignment, where the entire coin design shifts out of place, leaving part of Lincoln's head cropped off at the rim or pushing the date into the edge of the coin like a misprinted stamp. And when such an error is extreme yet well struck, meaning the details remain visible and sharp, collectors feel as if they are holding a glitch. In reality, physical proof that even the most disciplined process has cracks and flaws, and these errors create breathtaking values in the private marketplace, where collectors with deep pockets sometimes pay absurd premiums simply to secure something nobody else can claim. Because owning such a coin is not about metal content or face value. It is about rarity, prestige, mastery of the hunt, and victory over other collectors trying to chase the same legends of rarity and imperfection. When we talk about a single 1986 penny worth $100 million, we are not talking about a basic circulated cent found in a drawer or wrapped in bank rolls, but rather the hypothetical super specimen that meets every extreme condition in one package, the holy grail that coin hunters dream about, a coin that would need to be absolutely pristine, preserved from the moment of minting, error-laden in a spectacular and visually undeniable way, perhaps struck off metal, perhaps dramatically doubled, perhaps featuring wild plating eruption, perhaps being a misaligned or off-center strike, or perhaps combining multiple rare errors at once in an impossible fusion, because it is in the convergence of miracles that collectors see true treasure, and the bidding wars that erupt when wealthy buyers enter the arena drive valuations beyond any rational threshold, which is why people hear stories of coins selling for numbers that sound impossible, because when rarity meets desire and historical novelty, markets explode. Imagine a 1986 penny struck on an old copper planchette, double die on the obverse, misstruck off-center, and saved in near perfect mint state condition from the moment it left the minting press, sealed somehow in time like an artifact of chaos. And imagine 2 or more billionaire collectors whose competitive rivalry pushes them to place bids not for the logical worth of the coin, but for its symbolic power, the bragging rights of owning it, the psychological satisfaction of winning at an elite level of exclusivity, and in such scenarios the perceived value could balloon into astronomical numbers, each bid climbing like steps on a ladder, spiraling until the price reaches a figure that sounds impossible to ordinary people who handle pennies casually, unknowingly dropping fortunes into tipping jars, wishing wells, and couch cushions. And then you must consider the storytelling aspect, because value is not just metal and mathematical rarity, it is narrative. It is legend. It is the feeling that this one odd little coin escaped destruction, survived a million chances to be melted, discarded, all lost, and now stands as the extraordinary exception in a world of uniformity. And as collectors across generations retell its story, its legacy grows, and the myth surrounding it becomes its own marketing engine, able to push valuations into the stratosphere, because humans do not collect coins for their intrinsic worth. They collect them for meaning, for history, for identity, for the opportunity to say they discovered something nobody else found, and the 1986 penny becomes the symbol of hidden potential in the mundane, the gateway between everyday life and the exotic world of private numismatic collections where fortunes exchange hands like whispers in secret rooms.